Dragon Ball FighterZ is a 2D fighter developed by Arc System Works and was released in late January of 2018. It was a fighter able to stand out on its own thanks to the Dragon Ball name and the Arc System talent behind it. What stood out the most for this game, however, was its pick-up-and-play nature while being competitively viable. This pick-up-and-play design philosophy fighters had was becoming the standard for other fighters, and while other titles made this attempt before, such as Dive Kick, FighterZ was the one to gain the most traction. This standard can be seen in games that preceded it, such as BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, Granblue Fantasy Versus, and Guilty Gear Strive, all designed to be pick-up-and-play, but rewarding with enough time invested. So how did Dragon Ball FighterZ reinforce this design philosophy? By reducing the execution barrier and simplifying the actions a player can take. Every action and reaction in Dragon Ball FighterZ can be made with one button and requires few, if any, inputs from the player. Combos can be executed by mashing one button. Specials and supers can be performed with one button. Even closing the distance between one another can be done with one button. Other games have lowered this barrier by including a simple or stylish control scheme, but this game actually designs its whole gameplay loop around the simplicity. Each character is designed to have the same overall function and properties so that the player only needs to learn one character to be able to use everyone. For example, every character has access to this combo. Every character also has access to this overhead, light into throw, and other universal mechanics. This bears the question of, if every character plays the same, why bother picking this character or this character? The answer is preference and what you want out of your team. FighterZ is a very well balanced game to where every character synergizes with each other, and thanks to the selectable assist in Season 3, players can make a team of any combination. The complexity of FighterZ is brought in through the possible combinations that a player can make and making them function together. Ultimately, FighterZ is a game that is complex because it is simple. The player is only limited by what they can think of, but they can make any combination of characters work together. So if the game is so simple that anyone can play it, how's it even fun? FighterZ does everything it can to make every action feel good and give a return for the commitment. Every interaction in the game is accompanied with fantastic visuals, excellent sound design, and animations made directly using the source material, all combined to make each match feel like a DBZ fight, complete with yelling if you keep charge. Gameplay-wise, players are rewarded during many interactions for a relatively low cost. Players can get good damage and other interactions out of something simple like raw tag or super dash. Even performing high damage combos don't require much in execution, and if good enough, don't take many resources. FighterZ actively encourages players to take part in the aggression as much as possible by offering many ways to stay on the offensive and keep the damage as satisfying as possible. The developers in previous works have actively discouraged playing too defensive by imposing a negative penalty which will empty the player's meters and in some cases actively power up the opposing player. This was compensated in those titles by having enough defensive options to keep players safe, but still actively encourage aggression and deter turtle playstyles, such as BlazBlue's Barrier Block and Guilty Gear's Faultless Defense, both being able to block unblockables in certain situations, prevent chip damage, etc. In FighterZ, this penalty does not exist as the game encourages the player to stay on the offensive by offering high damage returns from low risk and even higher damage returns with the right combinations and execution. While FighterZ encourages this aggressive playstyle, the developers made sure that players could not be put into a situation with zero escape by making every interaction reactable and limiting how the player can mix opponents. For example, there are two universal mix-ups that every character can do, this overhead, and light into throw, as noted before. The amount of time it takes to react to anything is about a quarter of a second, or in this case, running at 60 FPS, 15 frames. The time it takes for a throw to go through this mix is about 20 frames, and the time it takes for the overhead to go through is about 24 frames. If a player can consistently keep that reaction time of 15 frames, they'll be able to either escape or counterattack before the mix can occur. Practically speaking, the player may have to be a bit patient before they can make their counterattack, but they'll be able to escape with something. The developers may have wanted to avoid putting a player into a situation where they feel stuck and can't interact with the game. Another example, I love Skullgirls, but I couldn't handle dealing with its level of mix-up on a daily basis. I can't explain it well, but it gets intense to where you have to think several steps ahead and hope you guess right. Also, Skullgirls players are insane. Even characters that put players in what feels like an impossible situation, there's an escape for it, as seen with this video by Reddit user Daydreams. Kudos to him for making this, by the way, link in the description below. FighterZ is able to keep up the momentum by always allowing players to really lay on the pressure and react accordingly. Both players are always able to make some kind of decision within the gameplay loop and look visually appealing to retain engagement. So with all this in mind, should this be your first fighting game? Personally, yes, and without the personal bias, still yes, but there are more options to consider. With more games embracing pick up and play, there are other franchises that you can just pick a character and do well with them, especially with more titles partaking in better practices. Like Guilty Gear Strive having robot netcode during a time where everyone is stuck at home. For fighters, with where the current balance is, you can quite literally play any character you want. For example, Twitch streamer Just Relax Kid recently partook in what he dubbed Goku Black History Month, where he played Zamasu, Goku Black, and Beerus, with 2/3 being considered the worst characters of the game, and yet still did very well. Despite the balance always being in a different state, FighterZ has always embraced player choice by making the game simple enough for a beginner to pick up and feel awesome, but bring enough complexity through team composition to make each player feel unique through their playstyle. Alright, so I've talked long enough. Now, I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think that FighterZ should be someone's first fight game, or is there a better alternative? I'd love to hear about it so I can fight you on it, but not really because I actually suck at fighting. If you want to see more of this kind of content, let me know in the comments. This was pretty fun, and I'd love to make some more stuff like this. Subscribe and all that jazz to keep up with what I'm doing, and honestly, thank you for your time and consideration. I hope you have a good one.